Look at the clothes you are wearing right now. The fabric against your skin, the seams, the buttons, the fit. You woke up this morning, pulled these garments out of the closet, and put them on without a single second thought. It is the most mundane, universal human ritual on Earth. But if you step back and look at our planet with objective eyes, what we are doing is utterly bizarre. Out of the millions of species alive today, from the blue whale to the common housefly, every single creature enters the world, lives its entire life, and dies completely naked. Except us. We are the only animal on Earth that cannot survive or function without wrapping ourselves in the skins of other creatures, woven plants, or synthetic fibers. We are the naked ape, yet we refuse to be naked. For a long time, scientists assumed the answer to why we started wearing clothes was simple. It got cold, we got smart, and we put on a jacket. But when anthropologists actually started digging into our evolutionary timeline, that neat little story completely fell apart. The real origin of clothing is far more mysterious, far grosser, and infinitely more profound than anyone expected. It involves an evolutionary crisis, an invisible parasite, and a psychological shift that fundamentally rewired the human mind. To understand why we started wearing clothes, we first have to understand why we lost our fur. About 3 million years ago, our ancestors looked a lot like modern chimpanzees. They were covered from head to toe in thick, dark hair. Fur protects against the scorching UV rays of the sun, keeps the skin from being scratched, and acts as built-in insulation during cold nights. But then the climate shifted. The dense forests of Africa began to shrink, replaced by wide-open, sun-baked savannas. To survive, our ancestors had to change their strategy. Instead of foraging in the shade of trees, they had to walk and run across vast distances under a relentless sun to find food. This led to a radical evolutionary adaptation: persistence hunting. Humans aren't faster than a cheetah, but we can run them to death by chasing them for hours in the midday heat. Animals like antelopes cannot sweat efficiently. They cool down by panting. If you chase them continuously, they eventually overheat and collapse. Humans could do this because we developed a superpower: millions of eccrine sweat glands scattered across our skin. We became the ultimate cooling machines. But for sweat to work efficiently, it needs to evaporate off the skin, and thick fur blocks that evaporation. So over hundreds of thousands of years, evolution stripped away our coat. We became bare. Now here is the massive evolutionary paradox that baffled scientists for decades. Anthropologists estimate that humans lost their thick body hair roughly 1.2 to 2 million years ago, but for a very long time, the earliest archaeological evidence of clothing only went back a few tens of thousands of years. Think about the implications of that timeline. If we lost our fur 2 million years ago but didn't start wearing clothes until recently, it means for over 1 million years our ancestors walked the earth completely naked. They faced the freezing nights of the African highlands, the brutal sun, and the biting insects with nothing but bare skin. Why would we stay naked for so long, and what finally triggered the sudden change to cover up? The problem with studying ancient clothing is that fabric and animal hides rot. If a prehistoric human wore a deer skin 100,000 years ago, that skin decomposed within a few years. It leaves nothing behind for an archaeologist to dig up. For a long time, the trail was completely cold. But then a group of evolutionary biologists realized they were looking in the wrong place. They didn't need to look at ancient textiles. They needed to look at the DNA of a creature that has lived on the human body for millions of years: the louse. Human beings are uniquely cursed with 2 different types of lice that specialize in targeting our bodies: the head louse and the body louse. The head louse lives strictly in the hair on your head, clinging to the hair shafts. The body louse, however, is a completely different beast. It doesn't actually live on human skin or in human hair. It lives exclusively in the seams of our clothing, only crawling onto our skin to feed before retreating back into the fabric. Biologists realized that the body louse could only have evolved after humans started wearing clothes. By using modern DNA sequencing and looking at the genetic mutations between head lice and body lice, scientists could trace the exact moment these 2 species split from a common ancestor. The molecular clock revealed a stunning date. The body louse evolved roughly 83,000 to 170,000 years ago. Because these parasites could not exist without clothing, this genetic fingerprint gave us our definitive answer. Humans began wearing clothes regularly somewhere around 170,000 years ago. This date is incredibly significant because it aligns perfectly with a massive turning point in human history. Around this time, Homo sapiens were expanding their territory. The world was entering a major glacial period, and as humans moved out of Africa into the freezing climates of Eurasia, survival without protection became impossible. Early clothing began as simple wraps and crude animal pelts. But as thousands of years passed, the technology exploded. Around 40,000 years ago came one of the most important inventions in human history, the eyed needle. Made from bird bones or mammoth ivory, these tiny needles allowed humans to punch precise holes through tough leather and thread them together. Clothing transformed into form-fitting, multi-layered garments like trousers, boots, and hoods. This tailored clothing acted as a portable microclimate, trapping a layer of warm air right next to the skin. With this technology, humans could survive in temperatures that would kill any other primate instantly, allowing us to colonize the freezing steppes of Siberia. Neanderthals also wore clothing, but their garments were simpler, loose capes. They never developed the tight, tailored clothing that Homo sapiens did, which may have been a factor that allowed our species to outlast them during the Ice Age. But if clothing was just about surviving the cold, we would expect that in warm tropical climates, humans would throw their clothes away. Yet they didn't. In almost every culture across the globe, clothing became permanent. Why? Because somewhere along the way, clothing stopped being just a biological tool for survival and became a psychological tool for communication. When we put on clothes, we cover up our biological reality and replace it with a cultural identity. A tiger is always recognizable as a tiger, but a human can change their identity entirely just by changing their layers. In 1964, archaeologists excavating a site called Sungir, north of Moscow, discovered the burials of humans who died roughly 34,000 years ago. The skeletons were covered in thousands of perfectly carved beads made from mammoth ivory. By analyzing the positioning of the beads, researchers reconstructed what they were wearing: beautifully tailored tunics, trousers, and boots. It would have taken thousands of hours of intense, skilled labor to create these garments. They weren't made just to keep them warm. They were symbols of status, wealth, tribal belonging, and spiritual significance. Long before we had written language, we used clothing to tell the world exactly who we were and how much power we held. In biology, there is a concept known as the extended phenotype, which includes things an organism creates to alter its environment, like a beaver's dam. For humans, clothing became our ultimate extended phenotype. We didn't have to wait millions of years for evolution to give us thick fur, we just invented it. This outsourcing came with a strange psychological consequence. By wrapping ourselves in clothes, we created a profound boundary between ourselves and the natural world, isolating our bodies from the earth. We created the concepts of modesty, shame, and privacy, ideas that do not exist anywhere else in nature. We became so accustomed to this artificial second skin that today seeing another human completely naked in public is shocking or even illegal. The irony is beautiful. We stripped away our natural fur millions of years ago so we could run free across the plains of Africa, escaping the heat and conquering our environment. But the moment we stepped into the cold, we had to build our own fur back, stitch by stitch. We traded our biological skin for a cultural one, turning the simple act of getting dressed into the very thing that makes us human. Every morning, when you pull that shirt over your head, you aren't just protecting your body from the elements, you are participating in a 170,000-year-old technology that allowed a naked, vulnerable ape to step out of the shadows of the savannah and redesign the entire world.